Hello. Of course, I don't see whoever you are listening to this, but hello, whoever you are. I'm Robert McKay. I'm the sole owner and proprietor of this thoroughly amateur production known as Whiskey for Beginners. I'm going to roll up my sleeves while I yammer onward because it's just a tad bit warm here in my living room. So if you'll bear with me just a second, I will get to a review here. And what I'm going to review is Maker's Mark Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. You may know Maker's Mark even if you just started drinking whiskey, or even if you never have drunk whiskey. You probably know it by this wax, which I think looks cheap and cheesy, but it's a registered trademark. You can do a wax seal. You cannot do this wax running down. That's trademarked or patented, whatever it is. But this is a straight whiskey, meaning that it's at least 2 years old. It does not have an age statement on the bottle, which means, being a straight whiskey, it's at least 4 years old. It comes from the Maker's Mark Distillery in Loretta, Kentucky, not Loretto. Loretta. The bourbon is southern stuff, although you can make bourbon anywhere in the United States. This particular bottle I received as a Christmas gift from a friend at work. It's just a pint. And Maker's Mark, at least this basic expression, comes with a screw cap rather than a cork. And that's fine with me. Corks have their problems. And I got a little bit more in there than I wanted for a review, but won't hurt nobody. Let me go over here to the light and check the color. It's a nice copper gold, and the color, generally speaking, will give you an indication of age. The darker it is, the older it is, but that's just a rule of thumb, because a Scotch that's, say, 6 years old will still be fairly light in color. A 6-year-old bourbon from Kentucky will be fairly dark, and a 6-year-old bourbon from Texas is going to be right dark. So I do like to look at the color, though, even if it doesn't necessarily prove anything. Got my little Glencairn, well, regular Glencairn. They have what they call wee Glencairns that are smaller, but this is just perfect. Vanilla right off the bat. And for a while, Maker's Mark was my favorite whiskey. The first time I ever nosed it, it just was wow. I couldn't believe the panoply of aromas that I was getting. Over time, I have found any number of whiskeys that are better than Maker's Mark, which is not to say this is bad. This is good bourbon. It's just that there's even better out there. But when I nose it, vanilla, as I said, kind of a metallic vanilla. There's some kind of floral scent, flowers. I can't identify it. I don't know much about flowers. Bananas, which I frequently find in bourbon, although a lot of reviewers don't. There's almost a rubbery note in there that I've not noticed before on Maker's Mark. And sometimes you'll have one time when you're nosing whiskey or tasting whiskey, and you'll get a note that you've never encountered before and never encounter again. This is such a subjective experience that you can't guarantee you're going to get what anybody else does, or even what you got at the time before or the time after. and I keep swirling it. You may wonder why if you're new to whiskey. For one thing, it's a habit. I just habitually swirl it. But it also stirs up the whiskey, helps evaporation, brings the aromas up into the opening of the glass. Well, I'm not getting much more there, so I'll have a sip. Right off the bat, buttered roasting ears with honey and cinnamon. Now, I've never put honey and cinnamon on a buttered roasting ear. When I'm eating corn on the cob, I butter it and then salt and pepper. But I'm getting those tastes there on the palate, on the tongue, in the taste, however you want to phrase it. I try to avoid whiskey jargon because a lot of times all jargon does is make you feel important when there's just as good a way of saying the same thing that's not pompous. And I hate pomposity, although I suspect I'm capable of it now and then. That time, that sip was very honey forward, buttered honey, in fact. When I was a kid, we didn't have syrup all over the place, much less 40 million flavors of it. And a lot of times on our pancakes, we just mix honey and butter. And that was good. I haven't had pancakes in a long time. My mom figured cooking was for women and men didn't cook, so I've never learned how to cook. All I know how to make up is a mess of fried potatoes. And it takes a while to cook it right. You know, you can do it fast, but they won't be as good. And by the time I realize I would like a skillet of fried potatoes, I'm so hungry I don't want to wait that long. But I got buttered honey there on that sip. And let me nose it again. Not getting anything new. Sometimes after a sip or two, you can go back and nose the whiskey again and get some new notes because taste and smell are very tightly tied together. I'm not getting anything new on the palate either. Let me clear my palate out with a swig of Coke. Now, that works better for me than water. I did another review just a few minutes ago, and water just didn't seem to help. And I don't know why Coke works better for me than water does, because water is what whiskey reviewers typically use. Nothing new there. But it is an oaky finish, kind of a bitter oak, though it's not so much woody as bitter. And all it is really is the oak, but it is lasting a while, which I like. I like a good long finish, and I like plenty of oak in my whiskey, and it usually comes out most strongly in the finish. And I think part of why I'm not getting so much out of this Maker's Mark, because normally I get more when I'm drinking my nightly glass. I think it's because it's morning. Well, yeah, it's 11:37 here in Albuquerque, and normally I don't get to whiskey at all until late at night after I've been eating all day, drinking all day, doing this and that and the other, and those things can affect the taste of the whiskey. So this is better than I'm making it sound. Uh, Please don't go solely by the few notes that I've gotten. This is not my favorite bourbon anymore. It's not my favorite whiskey anymore. It's slipped down on the list as others have come along, but this is pretty good bourbon. You could do a lot worse, than by Maker's Mark. And so that's that for this review. Y'all have a good one.